Good morning, everybody. State Representative Tracy Ehlert here from the Iowa House. Today we have Representative Jennifer Konfrst with us as our guest, and we're going to talk about different roles within the legislature, different leadership roles. Jennifer, you want to tell us your title this year?
I am the House Democratic Whip, which is a very weird term and one that a lot of people don't understand. And so I'm glad we have a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, so you want to explain to us what the whip does?
So the traditional role of a whip in legislative bodies is to whip votes. So my job would be to go around and see where everybody in my caucus, the Democrats in my case, where they are on a certain issue. A little more important in the majority because you need to have a certain number of votes to pass something. And in the minority, our role is really to take a stand against legislation and so there are times when we need to know how everyone's going to vote, but we have a little less conflict when it comes to votes that they do in the majority because we don't have a say in what legislation comes up. So in this role, really, my job is to sort of be like a deputy leader. And so I work with our minority leader, Todd Pritchard, and try to help him out with big picture items. That includes both legislative stuff, like making sure the trains run on time, and also campaign things, making sure we get candidates recruited and we're getting started for the 2022 election cycle.
Now, you in previous years have also held a different type of leadership role. You want to tell us what your leadership role was last year and explain that position as well?
Last year, I was an assistant minority leader, and that's a job that there are 4 assistant minority leaders. And then we sort of get divided into tasks. So one of us is responsible for fundraising. One of us is responsible for outreach, the Speakers Bureau, where we go across the state and talk to people. One of us is responsible for sort of social activities and things we do as a caucus. And then one of us is responsible for policy legislative stuff. And so my job was fundraising. It's the least favorite job. It's the one that everyone, it's the one that everybody gets when they're a freshman, if you're an assistant leader. So that's what I got because I was a freshman when I got this job. And so my job was to make sure everybody was raising money, not a fun job. But it is what it is, and money's really important. I wish it wasn't, but it is. So, and I should say that both of these positions are decided by the caucus. So there are 41 members now of our caucus, and we vote to decide who our leaders are. So we really do get to control our own destiny there a little bit and have some say in the direction our caucus goes.
So there's also other roles such as ranking members, Speaker of the House. You want to explain a little bit about those roles or any other ones that I'm forgetting?
Yeah, and so the person who's sort of in charge of the Iowa House is the Speaker of the House. And that role technically isn't a partisan role. It is technically the person who's over the entire House of Representatives and rules from the chair on any number of things, whether or not a amendment is germane or connected to the bill, or when we're going to meet today or whatever. But because the majority party has more votes, that person traditionally has been a member of the majority party just because they get the most votes. And those votes are typically done by acclamation. Once you know who the speaker is going to be, Democrats, it doesn't do any good to put up a challenge or anything like that. So that role is sort of the top role in the House. And then there's a majority leader and a minority leader. And those 2 roles are voted on by the caucuses. So in the Iowa House, the Republicans voted for the majority leader. And in this case, it's a he. His job is to decide what bills we're going to talk about tomorrow, where things are in the process, and really, I'm using this phrase again because he uses it a lot, keep the trains running on time. Make sure that debate is happening when it should. Make sure that they have the votes in the House to get a bill passed, making sure the procedure works well on the floor, and deciding what we're going to talk about and what we're not. And then the minority leader's job is to lead the caucus, the Democratic caucus, and to be sort of the loyal opposition. So our leader, in this case, it's Todd Pritchard. His job is to say, we're going to go to caucus. We're not happy with the way this debate's going, or we're going to make sure that you're sticking to the rules. We're going to hold you accountable for votes that we don't think are the right votes for Iowans. And we're going to make sure that our voice is are heard. The minority voice needs to be heard in any legislative body, and Todd's job, the minority leader's job, is to do that. And then on every committee, we have committee chairs. You can just picture like your church committee or the or the PTA committee you have at school. A chair and a vice chair. Those members are from the majority party, and then a ranking member is essentially the lead Democrat, the lead minority party member on that committee. And then their job is to decide what bills. I should go back. The majority leader decides what bills go to what committee. So, a bill that comes in about childcare might make sense to go through an education committee, right? Or health and human services.
We usually get them on health and human services.
And so that's great. But sometimes randomly, bills will go to the labor committee or to another committee, and that's all decided by the majority party. And then the committee chair decides a subcommittee, and then the ranking member decides which member from their caucus will be on that subcommittee. And all subcommittees have a chair, a ranking member, and a third member who's from the majority party. So it's all very sort of reverse pyramid or pyramid based. You start with the speaker, you have majority leader, minority leader, and then you have assistant leaders or the whip, then assistant leaders, and then you have committee chairs and ranking members. Like a really, really boring flow chart.
That really is a good way to describe it. Yes. Anything else that you think would be important to know about these different roles that maybe the everyday person doesn't know? I will admit that before I came into the legislature, I didn't realize there were all those roles. I knew the chair and the vice chair on the different committees. I knew there was a speaker of the House and, the minority and the majority leader, but I didn't know about leadership and all that different stuff. So anything, sometimes when now, you don't think of certain questions that maybe other people have. Anything else you think might be important to know about
those? I think it's important to note is that a majority leader, a minority leader, a speaker are not the boss. And so it is not, Todd Pritchard can't tell anyone to vote a certain way. Our bosses, your boss, my boss, are the 30,000 people in our districts. And so it is a challenge sometimes for any party to manage a room of people who have no boss in the room and who have nobody to tell them what they do. We make decisions together. We often come to conclusions together because we know what's best both for our district and our party and our caucus. But one thing that I really admire about our minority leader is that he always says, and Tracy, this phrase, vote your conscience.
Vote your district.
And what's so great about that is that when you're considering a bill, you don't have to take a vote because your minority leader wants you to. You take a vote because it's best for you, who you are as a person, and your belief system and your district. And that is a very freeing thing. Of course, everyone would say, well, that's how it should be, but it isn't always. Sometimes leaders will say, you're going to vote this way. And they don't really necessarily have, you can't fire somebody. You can't fire a member, but you can make their life less fun, right? You can take them off of all of their committees. You can organize a primary against them. There are a lot of things you can do. I do think, if I'm being honest, that happens more in the majority party than it does in the minority party caucus. Now, they've not invited me to one of their caucuses, but I'm sure they will soon. But one of the things that I hear is that they need to fall in line a little bit more maybe than we do. And that might just be a function of being in the majority, right? It just might be that they need the votes, 51 votes. And so there's a little more pressure to vote with the caucus. But we're hearing a lot this year that pressure doesn't really, not everyone's holding to that pressure because they know that they need to vote their consciences in their district. So that's the weirdest thing, is that I've been a boss a lot in my life, and it's strange to look at a group of colleagues and know that all we're doing is making suggestions, and it's a little strange, but it's also really freeing because it's really collegial and everybody has a say and everybody has a voice, and it truly is democratic, lowercase d, when it comes to making sure that what we're doing as a caucus makes sense to everybody.
I agree. And thank you so much for joining me this morning. I think that listeners are really going to find this informative, and I'm excited to put this one out soon and have everybody listen. And thank you again to all the listeners, and thank you, Representative Konfrst, for joining this morning.
Everyone who's represented by Representative Ehlert, you are very lucky. So thank you very much.
Thank